Thank you. By analogy, I'm not exactly sure what team is supposed to win now, but maybe leadership and responsibility, and maybe what we're supposed to do is overcome antimicrobial resistance in the best we can. By way of introducing myself, because I'm not in your program in terms of introductions and background, I thought it'd be useful for me to tell you a little bit about myself, mostly because what I'm going to lead up to is to say until I joined Merck, not quite 2 years ago, I had a tremendous amount of ignorance about animal health and about the tremendous strides that are being made in terms of stewardship in the fields of animal health and veterinary medicine. And I think there's a message here and a potential danger, because I've actually testified before Congress on 3 occasions regarding antimicrobial resistance, and you don't want to have ignorant people, right, testifying before Congress. So the bottom line of what I'm going to try to say here is that we have to figure out a better way to communicate to thought leaders on the human side about the work that we're all trying to do together. And in fact, that the problem isn't necessarily so much on the animal side, but I will get to where I think the biggest problems actually exist and how can we all work together, because if we don't do that, then I don't think there's going to be much success. So just briefly about myself. I'm trained in internal medicine and infectious disease for the last 40 years, board certified in both. I've spent roughly half of that 40 years in academia and about half in industry. My first job was as chief of infection control in a city hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, University of Tennessee. I then became division chief of infectious disease at Texas. I then became chair of a department of microbiology at University of Michigan. Go Blue. Sorry, any Ohio State people out there? Go Blue. And then I ran infectious disease R&D at Eli Lilly before moving to Boston, professor of medicine, Harvard Medical School, and then going back into industry again, where I helped develop daptomycin for MRSA before, after 12 years of that, being acquired by Merck, only roughly a year and a half ago. And it was actually through my interaction with Rick Sybil, who's no longer here, but he's a member of the project team and committee, who's a leader in animal health, when Merck was trying to put together a joint understanding of antimicrobial stewardship, that I started to really get educated about what's going on the animal health side. Now, to make me even more dangerous, back in the days when I was still at Michigan, 1989, I was a member of a National Academies of Sciences committee that wrote a report entitled, it was a 217-page report, which you can still find online, Human Health Risks with the Subtherapeutic Use of Penicillin or Tetracycline in Animal Feed. This is growth promotion. And in part, and experts on the panel, we got tremendous testimony, et cetera. We wrote this report. In retrospect, we had just about no data. No data. A lot of inference. We came out with strong conclusions. And I would say a problem that we still have is that we've got pretty good qualitative understanding of what causes resistance, what things we could do from a stewardship side that might help. But do we have truly quantitative information to know how much of this will end up with how much of this in terms of improvement? And I've been hearing over the last 2 or 3 days some terrific discussions about that sort of thing, maybe whole genome sequencing and being able to track organisms from one place to another might help. But I'll also point out that having, I was also editor of 2 ASM journals for a total of 17 years, infection, immunity, antimicrobial agents, chemotherapy. And for the last year and a half, I've been reporting up to the chief medical officer, and then more recently Julie Gerberding, who was the former head of the CDC, and I think Julie's leadership in bringing the stewardship understanding throughout Merck, meaning human health and animal health, has gone a long way to helping me. So just a few comments about Merck. We've been in the, I can say we, because now I feel I'm a member at Merck. We've been in the infectious disease business for over 75 years. Penicillin, of course, we were part of getting that to market, 71st beta-lactam, streptomycin, the first aminoglycoside, imipenem, the first carbapenem, ivermectin, not an antibiotic, but an antiparasitic, treating river blindness, and literally billions of dollars worth of ivermectin has been given away for free to Africa to deal with river blindness. And it got a former scientist at Merck, now retired, Campbell, the Nobel Prize last year, as you may have seen. In addition, on the vaccine side, every bit as important, if not more so, than what we're talking about from a stewardship standpoint, Merck produces, I was amazed by this, 90 billion doses every year for animal health. Somewhat amazing. And then we've got other things that are going on. So last week, I spent, as some of you did, a week in New Orleans at ID Week, the Infectious Disease Society of America, and got to hear some very interesting reports about what's going on globally. And from the organization known as CDD-EP, Dr. Gupta, who works with Ramanand Laxminarayan, a colleague that I've worked with who's on the PAC carb group, he made the following comments, that India has a fairly low rate of antibiotic consumption in animals, with China #1 and the United States #2. Despite that, it has the highest rates of ESBL and CRE. So how can you explain that? It's got a low rate in the animals, but yet it's got the highest rate of these resistances. And then he talked about why this might be the case, and it's been pointed out at the prior panel. One of them is antibiotic effluents that go into the water supply that are being consumed by animals and humans, and you find, importantly as well, selection of drug-resistant organisms in the water supply. And there was a study that I heard about, Jerry Wright presented several years ago, where he went to New Delhi and actually found the New Delhi metallo-beta-lactamase organism in puddles in the water. And he took a picture of that because right across the street were 4 pharmacies, each of which you can walk into and get, without a prescription, antimicrobials. Is there a direct connection? We can't say. But is there an inference? Of course. Now, I've talked at length with Ramanand about this, who's passionate. He's from India, and he spends time in India as well. He said, but Barry, you realize there's 2 other big problems in India, that it's a country of over 1 billion people, yet only 10% of that population can afford to see a physician. What are the other 900 million people supposed to do when they get really sick? They need a place to go. They need to do that without first seeing a physician, and they get their antibiotics that way. And the other thing I've learned about through him and others is that hygiene, because of the enormous poverty, is terrible. And there are no latrines. There are no places for people to defecate normally, as we think, in the proper way. And if we look back on our own history, you'll see that the greatest change in life expectancy in this country occurred roughly equivalent to the time when sanitation started to really come into vogue, 100, 150 years ago. That's when the big changes started to occur. He made another very interesting comment, and that was, if you spend 6 days or longer in certain parts of India, you have an 87% chance of coming home colonized with an ESBL Enterobacteriaceae organism, one of the serious organisms on the list. And in a paper that just came out in Lancet Infectious Diseases, as part of the same study, it was shown that if you're coming home and you happen to take an antimicrobial, either while you're there or on the way home, because possibly of traveler's diarrhea, etc., your chances of being colonized by this organism are threefold higher. So we have very strong inferential evidence of how this is occurring. The other scary part about this is the typical length of colonization with that organism is upwards of a year. Upwards of a year. So we need significant worldwide improvement, and we all need to take leadership in this regard, not just in the United States, but it seems to me on an international basis. Vaccine, sanitation, infection control. And I think we all have to figure out a way to work better together. And my last comment is, given the degree of ignorance that I had, and you could say I was in the 1 percentile of sophistication from an infection standpoint, infection control, I'd done it all, right? I knew very little about how much good things are being done in agriculture, and how can we collectively do a better job of educating people like me. Get articles published, get proceedings of this meeting published in journals that practicing infectious disease clinicians read, or even a broader audience, internal medicine or medicine in general. Along with we heard some great stories about certain states getting groups together. I think that's terrific. But even at the more national level, I was editor of a textbook of medical microbiology, and none of this information got into that textbook. How can we better teach our students?